This gets to our first fact of life. When money drains, power drains. When a nation loses control of its finances, it loses control of its destiny. And when the global superpower loses control of its finances, then you're in a situation where what we think of as the free world, protected by the United States since 1950, is also in danger of losing control of its destiny. Chuck Hagel has just made an announcement that the United States is going to downsize its military to pre-1940 levels. If you'd taken a train across North America in 1938 and you just looked at the men in uniform at the stations you stopped at, you would have thought Canada was the military superpower on the North American continent in 1938. So the idea of the United States military shrinking back to pre-1940 standards is quite a significant move. The US accounts for over 40% of the world's military expenditures. And the Congressional Budget Office has predicted that by the end of this decade, America will be spending more on debt interest than on its military. In other words, not paying off your MasterCard at the end of the month, but just paying or making the minimum interest payment necessary to roll over the debt till next month. The cost of that will be more than the entire budget for the US military, which means they will be spending more on debt interest than China, Britain, France, Russia, Japan, Germany, Saudi Arabia, India, Italy, South Korea, Brazil, Australia, Spain, Turkey, Israel, and Canada spend on their militaries combined. So within a few years, US debt interest payments will be covering the entire cost of the Chinese armed forces. If they ever have a military showdown over Taiwan, Washington will be funding both sides of it. That's how crazy it is. When money drains, power drains. And for Canada, the biggest geopolitical challenge will be to figure out a way not to get sucked down that same drain if America proves incapable of serious course correction. And by the way, just to pick up the point that Rick was making, that is why we are seeing the ongoing religious cleansing of the Middle East. Why Christian churches are being burned down and why Christians are fleeing the Middle East. The Christian community in Iraq disappeared on America's watch. The last Christian church was raised in Afghanistan, I think in 2011, on America's watch, because those guys have figured out that in the end you can be the biggest spender on the planet, but if you don't have the will to enforce your way, you can be provoked with impunity. If you're in Singapore or Australia or Poland or Israel, they'll tell you that the American moment, the post-Second World War order, is coming to an end. And they're making plans for the post-American world as best you can. If you're in Paris, they think that the 2-century Anglo-Saxon imperium from the British Empire to the American Republic, they see it like the Roman Empire and the Roman Republic as one continuous stream of history. They think that is now coming to an end. And in China, they think that a half-millennium perverse Anglo-European blip is coming to an end as the world returns to its natural Asian and more specifically Chinese domination. When you cease to be a part of the future, you also cease to be a part of the past because nobody cares anymore. Jason Kenney was talking yesterday about how our elites have a contempt for skilled labor. And so the presumption of how we raise our children is to divert more and more of them away from genuine primary wealth creation and say, well, why don't you just go to the University of Western Ontario and study transgender and colonialism studies for 6 years? If you swing by Carleton University and talk to a 7th-year human rights student, that's please. We have some in the house. I wish that were a joke, but it comes from a story in the Ottawa Citizen from last year. Students put up a so-called free speech wall to promote free speech, and it was destroyed a few hours later in, quote, an act of forceful resistance by seventh-year human rights student Aaron Smith. I don't know where Aaron Smith is. Maybe he's an eighth-year human rights student now. But you know, if you go to Carleton and you go up to a 9th year, 13th year human rights student, sitting on the grass on a summer's day, listening to the latest little dinky device from Apple about the size of a business card, let's not mock Aaron Smith too much. I'm sure it's very grueling trying to finish your thesis after a decade and a half. Let's just call him Chip. Chip doesn't work as hard or create as much wealth as Rajiv in Bangalore, who gets up early every morning and heads off to put in a full shift making the latest electronic gizmo from Apple that Chip loves. But Chip assumes he will always live better than Rajiv simply because he's Canadian, he's North American, and Rajiv in Bangalore isn't. And Chip would revile the comparison, but his assumptions are no different from Cecil Rhodes, who said in the 19th century, in the late 19th century, that to be born an Englishman was to win first prize in the lottery of life. And it was true once, and because it was once true, people assume it will always be true. But Chip is wrong in his complacency. An advanced, developed society is a rare and precious thing and has to be earned. And if all the Rajivs in Bangalore at the Apple factory work harder than all the Chips in Ottawa entering their second decade of human rights studies, then eventually economic reality will assert itself.